is over 100-year-old mystery.
The legend describes that there's a creek covered with gold.
The legend says that Slumach was a murderer killing to protect the gold that he had found. Slumach the Express.
Hello, history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. Get ready to hop on your imaginary horse and ride into the Wild West, a place where cowboys ruled, hats were bigger than common sense, and mustaches were practically their own animals. We're about to dive into 15 facts that will blow your mind faster than a tumbleweed in a windstorm. The first moving train robbery. On October 6, 1866, the Reno Gang pulled off a Wild West first, robbing a moving train. They hitched a ride on the Ohio and Mississippi Railway, busted into the express car, and grabbed about $18,000 in cash and jewels. But their big plan hit a snag. The safe was so heavy, it fell off the train and got left behind. The law eventually caught up with the gang, and 6 of them were hanged at a spot now called Hangman Crossing. And that's how the Reno Gang's train robbery became a legendary first in the Wild West's book of misadventures. Gettysburg of the West. In 1864, Confederate General Henry Hopkins Sibley decided it was a good time to invade Missouri. His plan was to take some pressure off the Confederate armies in the east. But instead of finding an easy victory, he ran into Union forces led by General Samuel Curtis, who had about as much interest in giving up Missouri as a cat has in taking a bath. On October 23, 1864, the two armies clashed in what became known as the Battle of Westport, right where Kansas City, Missouri stands today. It was like a really intense game of capture the flag, but with cannons and muskets. The battle was so fierce that it looked like the 4th of July fireworks had moved to October. In the end, the Union forces came out on top, and Sibley's army had to pack up and head home. This battle was a big deal because it pretty much sealed the deal for the Union's control of Missouri. It was like a huge mission accomplished banner for the Union, and it really bummed out the Confederate troops. That's why they call it the Gettysburg of the West, because just like the famous Gettysburg battle, it was a game changer in the Civil War. The first bank robbery, a Wild West faux pas. Forget what you've seen in movies. Bank robberies didn't start with the Wild West. The very first American bank robbery happened in 1863 in Malden, Massachusetts. Edward Green, a postmaster with debt issues, tried to rob a bank, but only managed to grab a measly $5,000 after a shootout with a 17-year-old bank clerk. Green's big break didn't last long. He was caught, confessed, and was hanged in March 1864, becoming the first person executed for armed bank robbery. Who knew robbing banks could be so historic? The man with 2 graves. Jesse James was a notorious outlaw who loved robbing banks and trains, making him the Wild West's version of a rock star, minus the music. When he was finally taken down in the late 1800s, his family buried him in their front yard. Yep, you heard that right. It seems they thought if the grave was in plain sight, nobody would dig him up for a creepy souvenir. But wait, there's more. Later, Jesse's body was moved to a proper cemetery in Kearney, Missouri. Fast forward to 1948, and a guy named J. Frank Dalton, who was 101 years old, showed up claiming to be Jesse James himself. He even got a court to let him legally take Jesse's name. Talk about a midlife crisis. Meanwhile, in Granbury, Texas, there's another grave with Jesse James's name on it. Turns out, it belongs to Dalton. So how did Jesse James manage to have 2 graves? Some folks think Dalton was just a smooth-talking con artist, while others think he might have been a distant relative, or even Jesse's secret kid. There's even a wild theory that Jesse faked his death and lived under a new name. Whatever the truth, Jesse's final act had more drama than a soap opera. Feral camels, the wildest immigration plan. Ever in 1855, the U.S. Army thought camels were the new must-have accessory for desert travel. They imported 75 camels to Texas, where they hauled supplies and even explored new routes. But when the Civil War hit, the camels were set loose and went rogue. Some wandered off, others were sold, and a few even made it to Mexico. Imagine camels running wild in Texas. Talk about a camel-tastic adventure. The buffalo hunts by rail. Back in the 1860s, when trains were just getting started in the Wild West, they brought more than just passengers and cargo. They brought trouble for the American bison. Yep, those big, majestic buffalo were in for a rough ride. Before the Transcontinental Railroad stretched from coast to coast, an estimated 30 to 60 million bison roamed the Great Plains like they owned the place. Native Americans hunted them for food and supplies, but they were careful not to overhunt. They knew the importance of not turning their bison buddies into an endangered species. But then, with the arrival of the railroad, hunters from the east saw an opportunity to make a quick buck. They started shooting bison for sport, and not just a few. Hundreds of thousands were killed, leaving a bloody mess behind. It was like a bison barbecue that got way out of hand. The railroads even advertised buffalo hunts by rail, where people could shoot bison from the comfort of their train seats. Talk about a fast food approach to hunting. By the end of the 19th century, only about 300 bison were left in the wild. Congress finally stepped in and said, "Enough is enough." They set up Yellowstone National Park to protect the last remaining herd. Thanks to some serious conservation efforts, bison numbers are bouncing back, with over 200,000 now roaming North America. It's like the world's most epic game of don't mess with nature. Trainwreck, Extravaganza, the greatest show of the Wild West. In 1896, Texans were bored stiff, so William Crush had a wild idea: crash 2 trains together for fun. The event drew 40,000 people to Crush, Texas to see the spectacle. When the trains collided at 50 miles per hour, it was epic, but also dangerous. The boilers exploded, turning the event into a shower of iron and steel. 2 people died and many got hurt. Despite the chaos, Crush's stunt made headlines and sparked a debate about the ethics of staging such explosive entertainment. The most grisly photo shoots. Back in the Wild West, when outlaws met their end, townsfolk often demanded a last look photo. These snapshots were more morbid than a Halloween party, showing outlaws propped up like creepy mannequins. These photos weren't just for shock value. They served as a warning to other would-be criminals. Mess with the law, and this could be you. Plus, they were a macabre way to document the lawless frontier. The OK Corral Shootout, the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral, was like the Wild West's version of a flash mob, if the flash mob involved guns and lasted only 30 seconds. On October 26, 1881, in Tombstone, Arizona, a showdown erupted between lawmen and cowboys. 3 lawmen were hurt, and 3 cowboys were shot dead. The exact start of the fight is still a mystery, but one thing's for sure: it was a bloody, dramatic affair that left everyone talking, and it made legends out of those who survived. The Gold Rush. Everyone knows about the California Gold Rush of 1849, but did you know it wasn't the first? Nope. The very first gold rush was back in 1799 in North Carolina, when a kid named Conrad Reed found a massive 17-pound gold nugget. Imagine the excitement. Then, in 1828, Georgia got its own rush when gold was discovered in Dahlonega. But the biggie was California, where gold fever spread faster than a wildfire. Thousands flocked to California, dreaming of striking it rich, and the gold rush turned California into a bustling state, making it the Wild West's biggest treasure hunt ever. The Quick Draw Showdown. Wild Bill Hickok was a legend in the Wild West, and he wasn't afraid of a showdown. One day, he had a spat with a gambler named Davis Tutt over $40 in a pocket watch. When Tutt flaunted Hickok's watch in town, Hickok challenged him to a duel. On July 21, 1865, in Springfield, Missouri, the two faced off in what became the first recorded quick draw fight. Hickok won, shooting Tutt before he could even blink. This duel turned Hickok into a Wild West legend, proving he was faster on the draw than your average gunslinger. The Terrible Whiskey. Imagine walking into a dusty saloon, ordering the finest whiskey, and it tastes like you're sipping on pure gasoline. Welcome to Wild West whiskey, where the drinks were as unpredictable as a tumbleweed in a windstorm. Back then, whiskey producers mixed their booze with water or worse to boost profits. Names like Coffin Varnish and Tangle Leg should have been a clue. If you survived a night after drinking, it was probably because you were too numb to remember. The Bison Express. In the Wild West, the railroads were a game changer, but not for the bison. Before the trains, millions of bison roamed freely. Then, railroads brought hunters who wiped out buffalo for fun. Imagine a train advertisement. Shoot buffalo from the comfort of your seat. The bison numbers plummeted, and Native Americans lost their main food source. By the end of the 19th century, there were only 300 left. Thankfully, conservation efforts helped bison make a comeback, proving that even in the Wild West, good things can be saved. The Great Train Robbery. In 1872, the Wild West saw its first big train heist, and it was a doozy. A group of bandits led by the infamous Butch Cassidy, not the actor, and his crew pulled off the Great Train Robbery in New Mexico. They stopped the train, made off with cash and valuables, and vanished into the desert like they were auditioning for a magician's act. The robbery was so daring, it turned Butch Cassidy into a household name and made robbing trains the coolest, or at least the most notorious, job in the West. The Wild West Wrestling Match. In the Wild West, even wrestling was a spectacle. Known for their rough and tumble ways, cowboys would settle scores with good old-fashioned wrestling matches. Picture this: dusty cowboys in their work boots throwing down in a makeshift ring, where the winner might just be the last one still standing after the dust settled. These wrestling bouts weren't just for sport. They were a way to settle disputes and entertain the locals, often ending in cheers, laughter, and the occasional broken hat. And there you have it, 15 wild and wacky tales from the Wild West. From dueling graves to epic train heists, the Old West was never short on drama and excitement. If you enjoyed these quirky snippets from history, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fascinating stories and outrageous adventures.